Hey everybody, it's Dana and welcome back to the Valentine's Day card series for 2023. Today is day 3 and I thought we would do a few cards using some mixed media products. So I'm using Distress Oxide sprays and picked raspberry, wilted violet, and candied apple. Now I've had these in my room forever and I have not played with them. So I thought today would be a great day to do that. Now I do have a piece of paper here that's 5.5 by 8 inches. And this is going to allow me to spray these gorgeous colors over this, and I'm going to be able to get several card panels out of this. So what is the better way than to use your mixed media products and be able to make multiple cards at one time? So today we are working on a trio of Valentine's Day cards, and they're all going to be made right out of this gorgeous background. So I started off with the picked raspberry. I put a little bit of the wilted violet, and then I'm coming in with that candy apple. Now these are the Distress Oxide inks, so they are going to dry back. They'll have a little bit of a chalky feel to them. So I have enough of the spray down, and I am going to go ahead and heat set this first layer. Now I could stop here, but I do want to build up and have some really pretty color here. So I'm going to pick this up, show you where we're at. I still see a little bit of that white paper in there, and I do want to cover that up just a little bit more. So I did turn my paper, and I'm going to spray it again. Again, I'm using the wilted violet, the picked raspberry, and the candied apple. So I do use these sprays or any kind of shimmer spray. I do use them in a box to make sure that I don't get this everywhere. Now, all the products that I'm going to be using today are going to be listed below in the description box. So if you guys want to pick that up, that'll be available to you. And I'll have a link below for everything that you need to purchase for this. Now for that last bit, I decided just to tap on some of the picked raspberry. I did want a little bit of a gold shimmer here. So I have this old Lindsay Gang Glitz Spritz, and this is Blazing Sun. If this is no longer available, I will link to a substitute below. But this is just going to give me a little bit of a gold iridescent. Now since I have everything done, I can go ahead and heat set this one more time. Now you can see that Blazing Sun, a gorgeous gold, and it's just going to give me a little bit of a hint of gold. It's not going to overpower the colors we already have. Now once this panel is dry, I am going to use the Hero Arts Heart Flourish cover plate. This is brand new for January 2022, and I know that this is going to fill up one portion of this panel. So it's going to allow me to have this delicate look on one side, and I'll still have another piece of paper to make the other cards with. So before I start, I do want to trim this down. Since I have the whole panel done, now I can go ahead and trim the piece down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So now I have 2 pieces to work with. I'll set one of these pieces aside, and then I can come back to this gorgeous cover plate. I have seen a lot of my teammates work with this plate, and oh my God, it is so pretty, and it fills up a card nicely. So I'll go ahead and lay that on there, make sure I'm centered. I am going to grab me a couple pieces of purple tape just so I can hold this in place. I don't want this to shift on this panel because this will cover up an entire card base. So I want to make sure that this does not shift. I mean, we put in a lot of work with this spray. We don't want to mess this up now. All right, I'll go ahead and run this through my die cut machine. Now look how gorgeous this panel is. It gives you this beautiful heart in the center, and it gives you all of that delicate like framework behind that. So now I just want to put a sentiment right across that heart. So I'm going to use the Your Mind bundle. This is also new from Hero Arts this month. It does come with coordinating dies, but I'm not going to use the dies today. I'm just going to use the sentiments. So I have already had a chance to have some fun with these off camera, and I know that I want to have that large You Have My Heart, and I want to place that right in the middle of the heart. Now I'm going to bring in my Misty to make sure I get this straight. But before I do this, I really want to make sure that I have everything lined up. So I'll go ahead and grab off that sentiment, and that sentiment is perfect because it fills up the space. Now, if you are new here to my YouTube channel, welcome, welcome. To my followers, and thank you for coming back. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that bell so you will see the rest of this card series and everything else I have coming for 2023. Now, I do want to make sure that this paper is dry because I don't want to start sprinkling on this white embossing powder and then it gets stuck everywhere. So as you can tell, it's nice and dry. We're not going to have any problems and we can go ahead and start stamping. So one more time, I am going to line that back up into the corner of my Misty. I will place my magnet on top to keep this in place. Now, I am going to stamp with unicorn white ink today. Now, I do know this is dry, but I did want to dust that off with my anti-static tool just to be sure. Now, the reason I like using the unicorn white ink is because when I put the white embossing powder on top of it, it allows me to get a more crisp, can I say, white sentiment or white image, whatever I'm stamping it with. And this is just a little tip. If you don't want to use the white, you can definitely use embossing ink by itself. Now, that white does pick up a little bit of the color from the background. So I don't want to take my ink pad directly back to the sentiment. So I am going to use a baby white. I'm just going to take some of that color off and then I can stamp this again. Now, because I'm going over this chalky kind of background, I am going to have to stamp this more than once. And that is the beauty of having a Misty, because I'm able to line that sentiment right back up on top. And like I said, I'm going to do this 3 times. But again, I do want to make sure that I clean off that stamp before I bring that unicorn ink pad back to the sentiment. Now, at this point, if I wanted to, I could have just did Versamark or embossing ink because I already have the white down, but there was no need to do that because I already had the unicorn white ink that I was using. I will go ahead and press that down, and I'm pressing kind of firmly, but not too much because I don't want to bloom the sentiment. So now you can see we have a nice crisp white sentiment that we can go ahead and pour the embossing powder on. But once again, if you don't have the white unicorn ink, you could totally use embossing ink for this. I'll sprinkle on a little bit of that white embossing powder, and that white embossing powder I'm using today is the detail white embossing powder from Hero Art. When I'm doing my sentiment, I really like to use the detail embossing powder because I find that I get crisper sentiment with it. So I can go ahead and move that embossing powder out of the way, and then I can go ahead and start heat setting this. Now look how gorgeous this card is. But remember, I said we're making a trio of Valentine's Day cards today. So this is just card 1. So this is a little bit of a longer video for me, but I wanted to give you a lot of bang for your buck out of this one. So if you want to try this technique, you can already have 3 cards done just by using the supplies that we already had out on our desk today. All right, so I'll go ahead and heat set this, and you know when it's dry because the embossing powder will become a really bright white. That is nice and dry, and look how gorgeous that is. Now remember, I said that this is a cover plate, so this is going to fit over a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card. That's your standard A2 size. So I have my score buddy here. I am going to score that at 4 1/4. I can go ahead and fold this over and I'll have a card base made. Now we can go ahead and build up this card. Again, this is a cover plate, so it's going to cover all of the card. And look how pretty that is. 1 die, 1 sentiment, perfect card. So remember, if you don't have a lot of time to make a whole bunch of different kinds of cards, grab these large cover plates. They make card making so easy. So even if you didn't do the ink blending and you just wanted to do this in, let's say, red or pink paper, it really fills up your card nicely. And then all you have to do is add a sentiment. So if we're going to be making clean and simple and easy Valentine's Day cards this year, this is the perfect cover plate for that. Now, once I have all of my glue onto the back of this image, and the reason I am using a wet medium here to glue this down is it's going to give me a little bit of a wiggle room in order to slide everything into place. Now, if you wanted to, you could totally make a shaker card out of this. I think that would be absolutely gorgeous. But today we're going to make a trio of cards, and we're going to make these easy so that you can mass produce those holiday cards this year. All right, so this is a perfect Valentine's Day card. Really easy, really clean and simple, but it does have a lot of color for just a little bit of work. All right, card one is done. Let's go ahead and start working on card number two. Now remember, we had the other half of that panel left. I am going to be using another large die. This die is called the Love and Florals Fancy Die. And look how gorgeous this is. Now I am going to grab my Hero Art snippets, and I'm just going to remove the floral parts away from the love. I really don't need those pieces today. I really just want the sentiment. Now, once I have that all cut, I am not going to cut the letters apart. They have like a little wire between them that's holding them in place, and I'm going to use that to my advantage. I'm not going to cut that apart because this is going to help me line everything up. Now I'll go back and grab some of that purple tape and make sure I tape this down. Now, I don't want the tape to be too sticky, so I am just gonna very lightly put it on here, because when I run this through my die cutting machine, I don't want this to shift, but I also don't want it to tear my paper. All right, now I can go ahead and pop this out, and we have, look at that, card number two, because I have this great panel that I can just go ahead and put on a card base. Now I did want to trim this down a little bit, and I did want a little bit of stitching on this. So this is an older die set from My Favorite Things, and it's rectangles, and it has like the little stitch lines. Now if this is no longer available, I will make sure to link an equivalent that has the stitching. I'll link that below as well. Now, before I do this, I do want to trim down this panel just a little bit, so when I put my die on there, everything's going to be even. Now, when I cut down panels like this, especially if they have an element in the middle, I like to take 1/8 of an inch off of all four sides. So when I do 1/8 and an inch from left to right, that's going to give me 1/4 inch off. When I do 1/8 and an inch from the top and the bottom, that's going to give me 1/4 of an inch off the top and the bottom. This is just going to help me like line everything up, and also get away from a little bit of that white that was left on the ends. I can go ahead and move that out of the way, bring back in my stitch die, and then I'm going to line this up. Now, at first I thought I might want to put a sentiment underneath the love, so I was looking to leave a little bit of space there, but then I decided I'm going to forego that. I'm going to actually raise this up and just cut it evenly from top to bottom. Just grabbing the purple tape that I used for the sentiments that were cut out, and I'll place that on here again, making sure not to put that tape where I'm not going to be able to peel it off later. So I ran this through my die cut machine, and look how gorgeous this is. This has a beautiful white border. Now I could take the letters and put them back in there and do almost like an eclipse and like raise the letters up a little bit. But remember, we're going to have a trio of cards here. So I need to keep these letters for my third card. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a little tip. Anytime you want to put your letters back into something to line them up. So I have all my letters here, but you know what? I didn't want them to be flat. So I am going to die cut this out a couple more times and add some height to this. But before I do that, I'm going to line up this panel onto my card base. Now remember, this is going to be for my second card. I'm just using it as a template to line up the letters. So I'll grab some of that purple tape again. I'll make sure I'm even all the way around. And then I'm just going to hold this piece in place. That's going to allow me to put that love right back into those holes, and I know that everything will line up correctly. Now remember, I did want to add some depth to this, so I did run the die through my die cut machine 2 more times, and this is with 120-pound thick cardstock. This is going to allow me to have some thickness to my letters without having to die cut this 4 or 5 times. I'm just going to have 3 layers, so I'll have 2 of the white, and I just stack them up with my glue. And then after I get these 2 stacked, then I can go ahead and put on the colorful piece. So as you can see, I just kind of line it up in my hand, make sure everything's lined up, and then all I have to do is put that colorful piece back on top. Now this is the same exact way I'm going to stack all of my letters. Now if you didn't want to do this, you could totally use foam tape, but I already had paper scraps that were sitting off to the side, so I just decided to go ahead and use those to give me some thickness to my letters. All right, once I have these all stacked up together, I have this beautiful love. Now look how gorgeous that is. Now if I wanted to, I could lay it across a card just like this. But remember, I already had that other piece. So guess what? This is going to be card number 3. So I'm going to have a lot of white space on this, and I'm just going to pop my letters back in. So this is just a tip. I'm going to start with my L. I'm going to place my L in there. And once I have it down, I'm going to very carefully lift up the back so that L pops into place. And it's not going to be stuck to that panel that is like our outline. Now I would go ahead and do that for all of the letters. And I'll line this last part of that O up. Again, pressing it down and very gently lifting off that panel. Because remember, that panel was just there so we can get our love centered onto our card. So I'm very gingerly going to go around this letter E, and then look how pretty. We have our 3rd card. Now remember, we only sprayed 1 panel, one 5.5 by 8 panel, and now we have 3 cards. I am going to push those little O pieces a little bit closer together just because I felt like the space between them seemed a little bit off to me. All right, so this is our 3rd card, and we're going to go back to our 2nd card. Now with this one as well, if you wanted to turn this into a shaker card, you could totally do that. But again, I'm trying to show you how you can mass produce without having to have a lot of bulk to your cards, which is perfect if you're going to be sending these in the mail. And also, you don't have to add any extra postage. So I'm using my Hero Arts Precision Glue here. Again, this is going to have a lot of white space on this card. And remember, you saw that every single one of our card bases was white. So again, I started with white paper, I added color to it, and I'm leaving it with white card bases. This keeps all of our cards very, very consistent in our color palette. So just straighten up everything here. Again, using that liquid glue allows me the opportunity to shimmy everything into place. Now look how gorgeous these cards are. So again, we have a trio of Valentine's Day cards here. Again, we just started with 1 piece of paper. Now you could leave your little trio of cards just like this. So here's the 2nd one. I'm going to bring in the 1st one and our 3rd one, and that could be our cards. Now I did feel like the 2 that did not have the color plate needed a little bit something to them. So I decided to add a little bit of sequins. Now I've had this sequence in my drawer. I'm not quite sure who made these, but again, if I can find an equivalent to this, I will list it below. I'll bring some of that out and I'll place this along the letters. I'm just going to place 2 on each one of the letters, and then I can glue this into place. Again, this is not adding a lot of bulk to my card, but it is giving me a little bit of shimmer that's going to actually help this card feel a little bit more special. Just a little bit of that bling really just steps up this card a little bit. Again, you don't have to do this. I just thought it would be a nice way to add a little bit of something else to this card. Now, I felt like that love was sitting a little bit flat, so I grabbed my Olo marker, and this is the lightest of my cool grays. And I decided to go around the letters just so they looked a little bit more dimensional off of the card panel. Now, you don't have to do this, but I felt it needed something. Now, once I did that, I did not like how light it was. So I decided that I needed to darken this up just a little bit. So I'm going to I think this is CG1, which is just one shade darker than what we started out with. And I think this looks a little bit better. It almost casts like a shadow on the back of our letters. Again, a very clean and simple card, but I just felt like this needed to stand up off the card a little bit more. Now, once I get that done, you'll see that this little trick just gave a little bit of depth to those letters. Now, remember, I'm on my card base, so I didn't want to add too much because I did not want it to seep through. Now, I'm going to come back into this card here, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go back in with that CG1 Olo marker and just line the inside. I'm just going right around the letter itself. And this is just going to give me a little bit of shading within my letters. So first we did the outside of the letters. This time we're doing the inside of the letters. I'll finish that up. And as you can see, it's a very, very soft gray right in the middle where the letters are. Now, I did decide after I kept looking at the card that had all the sparkle on it, that I did want to add a little bit of sequence to the rest of my cards. So I pulled back in my tray. I'm grabbing some of that purple tape to hold everything in place. And then I would go ahead and add a few of those sequins on this card as well. I'm just going to grab a trio at the bottom, a few at the top. Again, I'm not being very heavy-handed with this. I don't want a lot of sparkle. I just want a little sparkle. And now I'll come back in and do the same thing on our first card. Now, this could not have been easier for these trio of Valentine's Day cards. I mean, look how sweet they are. Again, we made 3 cards today with using one piece of 5.5 by 8 piece of Dove White cardstock. And look how gorgeous these cards are. So remember, you can easily mass produce your cards by using this little tip. All right, everybody, that wraps up day 3. I will see you back here for day 4 in just a couple days. All right, everybody, take care, and I'll see you back then. Bye-bye.